What would you do if you discovered a map of a city that won't exist for another 50 years? What if that map contained details so precise, so terrifyingly accurate, that it predicted not just streets and buildings, but the exact locations where people would die? This is the story of Martin Kellner, a cartographer from Prague who, in 1973, made a discovery that would drive him to madness and ultimately cost him his life. A discovery that challenges everything we think we know about time, fate, and the terrible burden of knowing too much about the future today. I'll tell you about the cursed atlas that showed a city 50 years before its construction, and why. The authorities buried this story so deep that it took me 3 years of investigation to uncover the truth. Because what Martin found wasn't just a map, it was a blueprint for horror. Martin Kellner was 42 years old when he inherited his grandfather's bookbinding shop in the Vinohrady district of Prague. The shop, established in 1897, had survived 2 world wars, Nazi occupation, and the communist takeover. Its basement was a maze of forgotten books, damaged atlases, and manuscripts that hadn't seen daylight in decades. In October 1973, Martin was commissioned to restore a water-damaged atlas from 1860. The client, a mysterious woman who paid in cash and refused to give her full name, claimed the atlas contained important family history. She would return for it in 1 month, she said, and vanished into the Prague fog before Martin could ask questions. The atlas was in terrible condition. Water damage had warped the leather binding, and several pages were stuck together with what looked like dried blood. As Martin carefully separated the pages using steam and specialized tools, he discovered something that shouldn't have been there: a hand-drawn map inserted between pages 47 and 40-8. The map showed a city unlike any Martin had ever seen. Towering glass structures pierced the sky, connected by elevated walkways and surrounded by perfect geometric gardens. Streets formed intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly logic. At the bottom right corner, in faded ink, that seemed to shift color depending on the light, was written, "New Sarajevo, founded March 15, 2023. Martin's hands trembled as he read the date, 2023, 50 years in the future. But what chilled him to the bone were the small red X marks scattered throughout the map, each accompanied by a date and a name. The earliest date was November 3, 2023. The latest was December 21, 2024, beneath the map. In the same shifting ink was a single line of text: "The city of the damned, built on the graves of the innocent, where death walks as architect." Any rational person would have dismissed the map as an elaborate hoax or the work of a talented but disturbed artist. But Martin was a cartographer. He understood maps, their precision, their purpose, and this map displayed a level of detail that would have taken years to create. The city's layout followed principles of urban planning that wouldn't be developed until the 21st century. The architectural styles depicted showed knowledge of construction techniques that didn't exist in 1973. Most disturbing of all, the geographical markers matched perfectly with a region of Bosnia that Martin recognized from his military service in Yugoslavia. Martin became obsessed. He spent days studying every detail of the map, copying sections by hand, trying to understand its purpose. He visited the Prague National Library, researching urban planning theories, architectural movements, even occult texts about prophecy and time travel. The red X marks haunted him. There were 67 in total, each marking what appeared to be specific buildings or intersections. The names written beside them were clearly Slavic: Marko Petrovic, Jelena Stankovic, Milak Radic. The dates created a pattern of death spanning 13 months, averaging 5 deaths per month. But it was the precision that terrified Martin most. The map included details no artist could have imagined: the exact number of windows in each building, the specific types of trees planted in parks, even the locations of underground utility systems. This wasn't art, this was documentation. 3 weeks after discovering the map, Martin made a decision that would seal his fate. He traveled to Yugoslavia, specifically to the region depicted in the mysterious map. What he found there changed him forever. The area was mostly farmland and small villages, exactly as the map indicated for the year 1973. But as Martin explored, using the map as his guide, he discovered something impossible: underground ruins. Beneath the fields where the map showed New Sarajevo's foundation, Martin found stone foundations perfectly preserved and arranged in patterns that matched the mysterious city's layout. Local farmers told him the stones had always been there, older than memory, older than their grandfathers' grandfathers. An elderly woman named Milica, who lived alone in a cottage on the proposed site of New Sarajevo's main plaza, told Martin a story that made his blood run cold. For generations, her family had been the guardians of what she called the sleeping city. Every 50 years, she said, someone would come asking about the stones. And every 50 years, that person would disappear. Milica showed Martin a collection of items left behind by previous visitors: a leather journal from 1873, a camera from 1923, and most recently, a notebook from 1923 containing architectural sketches that matched the mysterious map perfectly. "The city calls to those who can see it," Milica whispered. "It shows them the future because it needs architects for its return. But the price is always the same. They become part of the foundation." When Martin returned to Prague, his obsession had transformed into something darker. He began researching the names marked with red X symbols on the map. Using birth records, census data, and genealogical archives across Yugoslavia, he made a discovery that shattered his remaining sanity. Every single name on the map corresponded to a real person. Not only were they real, but their ages and locations matched the map's predictions perfectly. Marko Petrovic, marked to die on November 3, 2023, was currently a 10-year-old boy living in Belgrade. Jelena, scheduled for death on January 12, 2024, was a newborn in Zagreb. Martin had stumbled upon what appeared to be a precise record of future deaths, mapped onto a city that wouldn't exist for 50 years. But the horror deepened as he continued his research. The pattern of deaths wasn't random. Each red X marked locations that corresponded to specific architectural elements of New Sarajevo. Load-bearing pillars, foundation points, the exact centers of major intersections. The deaths were mapped to the city's construction like a grotesque blueprint, Martin realized. He was looking at something far more sinister than a prediction. This was a plan. New Sarajevo wasn't just going to be built on a specific site. It was going to be built using specific deaths as its foundation, each life ending at precisely the moment and location needed to power the city's construction. As Martin's investigation deepened, he began to notice he was being followed. Men in dark coats appeared outside his shop. His phone calls seemed to echo with extra voices. His mail arrived opened and resealed. One night in December 1973, Martin found his shop broken into, though nothing appeared to be stolen. However, he noticed that someone had photographed the map, leaving behind the faint smell of chemical developer and tiny drops of fixing solution on his workbench. That's when he met Dr. Elizabeth Kradikval, a professor of theoretical physics at Charles University who claimed to have been studying temporal anomalies for decades. She contacted Martin through a coded message left inside a book he had borrowed from the library. Dr. Kradikval revealed that Martin wasn't the first person to discover maps of future events. Throughout history, she explained, certain individuals had found cartographic anomalies, maps of cities, battlefields, even disaster sites that wouldn't exist or occur for decades or centuries. Time isn't linear, she told Martin during a clandestine meeting in Wenceslas Square. It's more like a vast library, and some people can access books from different shelves. But there are ... librarians who don't want certain books to be read. She warned Martin that he had attracted the attention of what she called the cartographers, a secret organization that had existed since the Renaissance, dedicated to controlling information that flowed between different time periods. They weren't just observers, she claimed. They were actively working to ensure that certain future events occurred exactly as mapped. New Sarajevo isn't just a prediction, Dr. Kratikvel whispered. It's a project. And you've found their construction manual. Working together, Martin and Dr. Kratikvel uncovered a conspiracy that stretched back centuries. The mysterious maps weren't random temporal anomalies. They were tools used by the cartographers to guide historical events toward specific outcomes. They found records of similar maps throughout history. A map of London showing the exact path of the Great Fire of 1666, discovered 50 years before the fire occurred. A map of Hiroshima with a red circle marking Ground Zero, found in a monastery library in 1894. A detailed plan of the Titanic's route, including the precise location of the iceberg collision, discovered in a shipyard office in 1862. Each map had been discovered by individuals who became obsessed with preventing the predicted disasters, and each of those individuals had mysteriously disappeared before they could act on their knowledge. The pattern was clear. The cartographers deliberately allowed these maps to be found, knowing that the discoverers would become so focused on the future events that they would be easily eliminated before they could interfere with the timeline. But Martin realized something the cartographers hadn't anticipated. Unlike previous discoverers who had found maps of events they couldn't prevent, Martin had found a map of a construction project that required active participation. New Sarajevo couldn't be built without the specific deaths mapped onto its foundation. If those people were warned, if their fates were changed, the entire project would collapse. Martin had found the one map that could be used to prevent its own fulfillment. Against Dr. Kratikvel's warnings, Martin decided to act. He began contacting the families of the people marked for death on the map, warning them about the specific dates and locations where their loved ones were scheduled to die. His first success was with the Petrovic family. He called Marko's parents in Belgrade, claiming to be a psychic researcher who had received visions about their son's future. He told them that on November 3, 2023, Marko should avoid the intersection of what would become New Sarajevo's main boulevard. The parents dismissed Martin as a crank. But when he accurately described details about their family that no stranger could know, details that appeared to be written in the margins of the mysterious map, they began to listen. Martin developed a system. He would research each family thoroughly, learning intimate details about their lives that somehow appeared on the map as small notations and symbols. Then he would contact them with warnings, disguised as psychic visions, always emphasizing the specific date, time, and location they needed to avoid. For 3 months, Martin worked frantically to contact all 67 families. He spent his life savings on international phone calls and letters. He learned Serbian, Croatian, and Bosnian to communicate more effectively. He became fluent in the geography of a region where a city would be built in 50 years. But the cartographers were watching. On March 15, 1974, exactly 1 year after Martin had discovered the map, he found a visitor waiting. In his shop, the mysterious woman who had brought him the atlas had returned. But she was no longer trying to hide her identity. She introduced herself as Helena Varga, a representative of what she called the Order of Cartographers. She was elegant, ageless in a way that seemed unnatural, and she spoke with the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "Mr. Kellner," she said, settling into the chair across from his workbench, "you have caused us considerable inconvenience." Helena explained that the Order had been manipulating historical events for over 500 years, always working to ensure that the timeline unfolded according to their master plan. New Sarajevo, she revealed, was just one of dozens of projects they had orchestrated throughout history. Every great city, she said, requires a foundation of specific energy. London needed fire. Hiroshima needed atomic power. New Sarajevo requires the precise intersection of 67 lives ending at exactly the right moments to create a temporal anchor strong enough to support what we intend to build there. Martin demanded to know what made New Sarajevo so important. Helena smiled, and for a moment, her features seemed to shift, becoming something inhuman. New Sarajevo won't just be a city, Mr. Kellner, it will be a gateway, a place where time flows differently, where the past and future converge. From there, we will have direct access to every moment in human history. We will become the architects of time itself. She offered Martin a choice: join the Order and help ensure that New Sarajevo was built as planned, or disappear like every other person who had discovered their maps. Martin's response was to grab the nearest bottle of chemical solvent and throw it at the mysterious map, intending to destroy it. The solvent passed through Helena as if she were made of mist. But when it struck the map, something extraordinary happened. The ink began to move, the lines rearranging themselves, the red X marks multiplying and spreading across the parchment like a disease. Helena's inhuman scream shattered every window in the shop. As the chemical solvent ate through the map, Martin saw something that explained everything. Beneath the ink, depicting New Sarajevo, was another map, and beneath that, another. The parchment was layered with dozens of maps, each showing the same location at different time periods. He saw the stone foundations from ancient times, showing symbols that matched no known civilization. He saw medieval structures built according to the same geometric patterns. He saw Renaissance buildings that had never appeared in any history book, all constructed on the exact same site. New Sarajevo wasn't the Order's first project in that location. They had been building and rebuilding on the same site for thousands of years, each iteration requiring its precise quota of death to power the construction. The city wasn't being built in the future, it was being rebuilt, using the same blueprint that had been used throughout history. But this time would be different. This time, the technology existed to make the gateway permanent. New Sarajevo wouldn't just be another iteration, it would be the final version, the one that would give the Order complete control over the flow of time. As Helena's form began to solidify again, she looked at Martin with something that might have been respect. "You understand now," she said. "This isn't about one city or 67 deaths. This is about the fundamental nature of reality. We are offering you the chance to help shape the very flow of existence." But Martin had seen enough. He had seen the layers of maps, the thousands of years of manipulation, the countless lives sacrificed to feed the Order's ambitions. He knew that stopping New Sarajevo wouldn't end their plans. It would only delay them. But delay might be enough. Martin's final act was both desperate and ingenious. If the Order needed specific deaths at specific times and locations to power their construction, then changing even one element of the pattern might disrupt the entire project. That night, he burned his shop to the ground, with himself inside it. But before he died, he mailed copies of the map and his research notes to 67 different addresses, one to each family whose member was marked for death in New Sarajevo. Along with each copy, he included a letter explaining everything he had discovered and begging them to ensure their loved ones avoided the specified location on the specified date. The fire that consumed Martin and his shop was officially ruled an accident, but witnesses reported that the flames burned in impossible colors and that the smoke formed patterns that looked like architectural blueprints hanging in the air. To Helena, Varga disappeared from Prague that night, but not before retrieving what remained of the original map from the ashes of Martin's shop. However, the damage had been done. Martin's letters reached their destinations, and slowly, families across Yugoslavia began to take precautions to protect their loved ones from deaths that wouldn't occur for another 50 years. This is where the story becomes even more disturbing, because I can verify what happened next. On November 3, 2023, Marko Petrovic, now a 60-year-old engineer living in Belgrade, received a phone call from his elderly mother. She reminded him of the strange letter the family had received 50 years earlier, warning about that specific date. Marko, who had grown up hearing the story, decided to honor his mother's request and stay home from work that day. That same day, construction workers breaking ground for a new development project in Bosnia, on the exact site shown in Martin's map, uncovered stone foundations that matched no known architectural style. The project was immediately shut down when 3 workers died in accidents that investigators described as impossible and defying the laws of physics. Similar incidents occurred throughout 2023 and 2024. Of the 67 people marked for death on Martin's map, 63 survived past their predicted death dates. The 4 who died did so in locations far from Bosnia, their deaths apparently natural and unrelated to any construction project. But the most disturbing discovery came in December 2024, when satellite imagery of the region showed something that made international headlines for exactly 1 day before being suppressed by government agencies across Europe. The stone foundations uncovered by the construction workers weren't ancient ruins, they were growing, spreading outward in perfect geometric patterns, extending underground in directions that matched Martin's map exactly. And at night, when the satellite cameras used infrared imaging, the stones glowed with heat signatures that formed the outline of buildings that didn't exist. Today, the site where New Sarajevo was supposed to be built is restricted territory, officially designated as a geological survey area. But locals report strange phenomena. Lights in the sky that form architectural patterns, the sound of construction work coming from underground, and most disturbing of all, the appearance of roads and sidewalks that vanish in daylight but can be photographed at night. The families who received Martin's letters have formed an informal network, sharing information about ongoing attempts to contact their children and grandchildren. They report that elegantly dressed strangers continue to appear at their doors, offering money, jobs, and other incentives to convince family members to visit Bosnia on specific dates. Helena Varga, or someone matching her description, has been spotted throughout Eastern Europe, always in connection with archaeological projects or urban development plans. She appears not to have aged in the 50 years since Martin's death, and the Order of Cartographers, they're still active. I know this because 3 days after I began researching this story, I found a hand-drawn map slipped under my door. It shows my apartment building, my neighborhood, even the cafe where I write my scripts. At the bottom, in that same shifting ink Martin described, is tomorrow's date and a single word: choose. Martin Kellner died believing he had prevented a catastrophe. He thought that by warning the families and disrupting the order's timeline, he had stopped the construction of New Sarajevo and prevented the deaths of 67 innocent people. But what if he was wrong? What if the order knew he would find the map? What if his desperate attempt to save lives was exactly what they needed to power their project in a different way? Because here's what troubles me most about this story. Martin saved 63 lives by convincing people to change their fates, but the energy from 63 prevented deaths. 63 disrupted timelines, 63 alterations to the flow of cause and effect. What if that energy was exactly what the order needed to complete their gateway? What if New isn't being built with death, but with the power generated by preventing death? What if Martin's sacrifice wasn't heroic resistance, but the final component in a plan 500 years in the making? And what if the map under my door isn't a threat, but an invitation to become the next person who thinks they're fighting the order while actually serving their purposes? I don't know the answers to these questions, but I know that tomorrow, at the time written on my map, I have a choice to make. And maybe, just maybe, the fact that you're watching this video means that I made the right one. Or maybe it means that I made exactly the choice the order wanted me to make. And this story isn't a warning at all, it's a recruitment. The map under your door should arrive any day now.